we're live. Welcome to another episode of my podcast. Chase, dude, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is perfect. Not too bad of a setup, thanks to Lake, right?
Yeah, very aesthetic. It's looking very good.
Yeah.
Looking cool.
So far, so good. So I wanted to ask, because you have that huge marketing background, I wanted to ask a couple tips or techniques that you think people could take away, or maybe even I could take away for the podcast on personal branding.
Do you have anything like in specific that you want to know? Anything that you like need tips on, or just like really general stuff?
Okay, well, actually, I could apply this kind of to like the podcast, maybe like adding another element that can be beneficial for differentiation or just kind of setting yourself apart, personal-wise.
So I feel like there's basically two ways. There's probably more, but there's two ways to stick out to me to really set yourself apart. One is you can look at what's already being done by other podcasters, to use podcasting as an example, and you can say, I want to do what other podcasters are doing, but better. And like when it comes to developing new products or developing tech, you have to have like a magnitude of 10 between like what you've developed in terms of quality and what the current market leader is, if you want to be able to take that market over and like get your product out there. So if you develop like a new smartphone, then you have to be 10 times better than the current smartphones in order for you to really like get in there. Otherwise, iPhone, Samsung, like all of these brands are just gonna like keep you crowded out and you can't really get in. In terms of like podcasting, what you would have to do is you would look at something that's being done, like if you go the comedy podcast route, you could just be way funnier than everybody else, like 10 times more funny. Or you could look at like what Joe Rogan's doing with interviewing like famous people at the top of their game, and you could say, all right, well, I'm going to either interview people that are more famous, or I'm going to get better insights or something, basically do what they're doing, but better. Another way, which I think is easier for people that are getting started, would be to look at what niche market is being underserved. So if you can look at a group of people, like to make something ridiculous up, let's say Smurf conspiracy theory enthusiasts. Nobody has a podcast for them, but they probably have a subreddit. I don't know.
Perfect example.
Yeah, right. So you start a podcast around something really niche. It helps if it's something you care about. So, let's see. Like, what are you super into that you could start a podcast around?
Chess could be a good one, but I mean that's very, very niche market. What I'm into,
and it would be difficult. It might be difficult. It might be difficult to, well, there's plenty of fitness podcasts, but you could do one that's a little bit different. It might be difficult to do like a chess podcast in terms of like audio, but you might be able to do one with like a video component or something. I don't know if you'd be like teaching chess or something, but if you could find a unique take on it, where like even if there is another chess podcast that exists, yours is more specific. So I'm trying to think.
Okay, so I think what you're kind of like the theme that I've kind of heard is like, instead of branch out to like a wider audience, you're kind of thinking more narrow and more tailored.
The more and the more focused you get, the more obvious it is to your audience what value they're getting from whether it's your product, or in this case your podcast is your product, even though it's not something like physical. They know exactly what they're getting. So a lot of the thought leaders in marketing right now are just going completely to the wall with the idea that you want to remove as much friction from your audience or your target market as possible. So in the terms of Amazon, that is one-click ordering. Because if you have to click through 8 screens, you can analyze that and you'll see that people drop off the more screens if they click.
Each click, it goes lower and lower.
Right, because it's more of a hassle. But if you can do one-click ordering or like 2-click ordering, or heck, you have that button now where you push it and it orders toothpaste from you or for you from Amazon, that just removes friction. So people will just go through it because they know exactly what like value they're getting. So getting rid of that friction. So in terms of your podcast or, a product you would make, you want to show people exactly what they're getting out of it. Like here's what you're going to get out of my podcast, whether it's entertainment or a good story or a good conversation or, you know, a little bit of knowledge in this area. Like if they know that going in, they don't have to like dig for the gold and like find the diamond. They know exactly what they're getting. It's like Link was telling us earlier. He was saying that podcast he listens to, it's like a little bit of like tech and news every Monday. So he's like getting that knowledge. So he goes back to it because it's interesting and it helps him be super informed on like Tesla and stuff. So it's like knowing exactly what you're getting out of a podcast or out of a product keeps people coming back and they know what's going on there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So you really just narrow it down and they basically know what they're getting into. Okay. A lot less friction. That's pretty good.
Well, I mean, can you think of some experiences personally where maybe on both ends of the spectrum where something has been so obvious that you know exactly what you're getting and that draws you in versus something is a little convoluted or too complicated and you just...
I think books can be a pretty good example. So for like a fiction book, it could be, I have no idea what I'm getting into. You read the back cover, but it's like, okay, that gives you like kind of a summary, but you never really know what you're getting until you really start diving deep. Whereas for the title, it could really separate it and kind of narrow it down, show you exactly what it is, or it could kind of be something completely separate. So it could be maybe a book could be a good example.
That's interesting. I feel like I read a lot of nonfiction. I feel like with those books, I want to know what I'm learning about specifically. Like the title might be something catchy, but the subtitle should be something that tells me exactly what knowledge value I'm getting from it. Sometimes in terms of fiction, though, if one of my friends really, really recommends a fiction book really highly, in that case, I might say, all right, don't tell me anything else about it. I want to go into the story blind.
Got it, yeah.
You know?
You kind of like it better when you don't know what you're getting into.
Right.
But that's more of like for fiction.
That's like, that would be specifically for something like a movie or a book.
Exactly. Yeah. But as for nonfiction, you kind of want to know what you're getting into.
Right. Like the difference is experiencing the story fresh or going to something that's going to like add like knowledge or value to my life in a little bit of a different way than a well-told story might.
Okay. Yeah.
That's I hate spoilers, you know. I like to go in fresh.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of books have you read lately, since you said you've been reading a lot of nonfiction?
Yeah. So most recently, I read this book called Justice by Michael Sandel, I want to say. He's
nicely done.
Some university professor. But that one was interesting because that basically it unpacks what's at the root of a lot of like moral arguments that people make. So you can take it like the trolley problem, like any theoretical like moral dilemma you could make up, and you could look at both ends of like what people would
Trolley's
say.
Going down, you don't know who to save. It's
Right.
Lots of people or
the one person. It unpacks it, and there's like a chapter. There's like 2 or 3 chapters dedicated to some of the large foundations of like moral frameworks that are contemporarily popular right now. So that way when you approach somebody in a conversation and disagree, you can say, oh, like I feel like I'm approaching this problem in more of a utilitarian perspective and you're looking at more of a libertarian perspective. So, you know, like how can we sort of like meet in the middle? And let's kind of getting at the why you might have a different perspective, I think is important. Instead of just disagreeing over the fact you're making the wrong decision, but it's like what like brought you to that conclusion in the first place. Gotcha. You know?
Okay. That's pretty interesting, actually. That could be very applicable towards sales as well. So for what I'm kind of learning is you find the objection and why they have that objection, and then you take it and then kind of show them, like, I understand where you're coming from. I have a lot of clients who have felt the same way. What they have found is this is beneficial because of this. So you take that why and you can apply it directly with something else. I feel like that's pretty interesting. That's from like a sales point of view, I guess. It could be almost taken in a different sort of way.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that sort of goes along with removing friction too. Like marketing and sales are pretty similar, but I feel like it goes to a lot of things where if you can get at the why, like what's causing your problems, or like you can remove. Some people will be polite and just say no and then give you an excuse with it. But if there's an actual reason and you can remove that speed bump or that lock, it becomes much easier, it becomes possible to move forward.
That's really interesting.
But how much more powerful is it when you can, like in sales or something, when you can predict what somebody's hang up is going to be ahead of time, and then you can work around it, like before they even have to bring it up?
What do you mean? Like how much more? You said it was.
What's your experience where you can look at like the customer journey you would have with somebody through sales or something, and you can figure out what their pain points are and what their hang-ups are, even maybe before they tell you, and you can take care of it for them.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
So I figured that out we actually have an initial application. So you talk to them first, you don't have anything. You're just trying to see,
does your podcast know what you do? Do you want to give a quick,
Sure,
Yeah.
good idea. So I just do sales, currently in mortgages. So I sell one of the most expensive things you can possibly buy is a mortgage. And so during the initial application, when they say, I'm looking for this, you kind of have to ask like, oh, why are you looking for cash out? Or why are you looking for a home equity line of credit? This is
what does cash out and home equity line of credit? What do those mean?
Excellent question. So basically you can get, if you've been paying down on your home and you start like chipping away at that loan you have, you start owning a little bit of a portion of your house. So that's called equity, the part that you own, that you have cash in, but it's not the rest of the loan that you owe the bank, because the bank owes your house, unless you own your house completely free and clear.
So so equity is like the portion of ownership that you have acquired against the loan.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And
And then what is cash out?
So
what does that mean?
You can get more cash out using the equity in your home that you've built up. So basically you have a new loan that has a little bit of a higher amount than previously, and so you're getting that extra cash. So it's like you have that new mortgage, but now you have like $25,000 cash in your pocket.
Okay.
That you can take away from the loan.
And the reason I ask I guess it's cool to educate your audience on, personal finance and mortgages and stuff. But the reason I ask is I want to have an idea of what those are. So when we're discussing like how you get around the hang-ups people sometimes have, I know.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
those are great questions.
Yeah, so
I'm glad you asked those.
Yeah, so after explaining those, so continue.
So as for when you're taking the initial application, you're understanding why they want cash out. So they want to do home improvements, okay? Or do you want to pay off some other debts? They want to use that cash to pay off other debts. So then an objection would be, oh, I don't want that interest rate. Well, you could say, okay, well, which is more important to you? That new interest rate or your current interest rates on all these cards that you have. So you kind of you have all these cards you want to pay off, and so that's what their why is, why they want the cash out. You take that and show like, well, which one you prefer? And then they're kind of like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. And so that's where you kind of get the objection before it even happens. It's just through the initial application.
Right, so they're like you're solving a problem for them, because I've heard it's the economic principle that the interest rate is the amount you're paying to buy money in the short term. So what you're essentially doing in that case is you're saying, hey, we're going to offer you a discount on the money that you're trying to borrow and buy by giving you a lower interest rate, so you can take the money and pay those cards off, and you can pay us essentially the same amount, right, but at a lower interest rate. Am I understanding that right?
So another good point. So kind of the interest rate it's a little different for mortgages, so it's very specific. So with a mortgage, you can do like a 15-year or a 30-year. So that interest rate will be there for 30 years. But I mean, if you move or you sell the home or you decide to refinance again, then that interest rate doesn't necessarily matter. It's only for those 2 years that you have, as opposed to the life of the loan. So if you wanted to just use that and pay off just all the other debts, then it would be more beneficial because you'd be saving money. But also, if you were really smart about it, you wouldn't be in that position in the first place. And you
right. It's always cheaper just to not.
It's always
not
cheaper.
Borrow. It's cheaper to not go into
money.
debt. Yeah. It's not borrow money.
Yeah. Don't borrow money. But I mean, if you have to,
because you're paying 0% interest on the money you've already earned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even with inflation, your money is just sitting there. So it's like, might as
well,
invest it.
With inflation, technically your money slowly decreases in value. But what if your money is decreasing in value while it's accumulating interest for somebody else?
It's
that's
just bad.
Yeah, that's
it's
something
really
nobody
bad.
wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So as for just kind of overcoming those objections, you have to ask why.
Yeah.
And why do you want this? And you take that, and you tailor it, and kind of think of, kind of just show them in their eyes and their goals and like what they want, and that's called like a benefit, how it will benefit them.
So when you are helping somebody refinance or really any of the services you offer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine there's a good amount of, there comes to a point where like they're interested, but there's probably like some complicated step and you say, oh no, we'll take care of that for you. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of that and we'll get back to you in 2 days or a week or something like.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps, very complicated steps, and you just say, oh no, like we'll take care of it.
Removing,
no worries.
removing friction. That's what that is.
Yeah,
Because if it's complicated, they're just going to back out because they're like, well, I know how to handle this loan and make my monthly payments, and it sucks, and it would be great to refinance, but I can't deal with this paperwork.
Yep.
But if you remove that step, then, oh yeah, I can keep doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my situation's going to improve.
And for refinancing, it's a huge ordeal ever since 2009, the stock market crash. That was basically because of the housing market. So now it's a very heavily regulated industry. So there's a lot of steps that we have to take that we can't avoid. So we can't take out that friction that it's always going to be there. So what I've found out is the best kind of way to approach that is you just let them know up front. Like, okay, next, we're going to have to get this paperwork to you. It's going to be like 30 pages. It's all regular governmental stuff. You could look over if you like. But it's everything that I've just told you on the phone here right now. Then you like answer all these. You ask them any other questions that they have right now because you want them to ask because you don't want them to come up later. So you're kind of seeing those speed bumps ahead or that friction, and then you're just kind of pointing it out and letting them know it's going to be happening. So it's like, yep, this is fine. Don't worry.
Well, I think too, you can't always remove friction. Like with Uber, that removes friction because instead of having to call a taxi service and order a taxi, you just press a button on your phone. Saves so much trouble. But when you're dealing with regulation, which obviously you don't want another housing bubble burst and a financial collapse.
Yeah.
Right. So with regulation, you can't always avoid certain parts of friction, but being able to tell the person what's going on so they don't, that's still removing friction, because if you tell them what's coming in those 30 pages and answer their questions, they don't have to go through and figure it out themselves and spend like, I mean, to be super conservative, spend an hour reading through 30 pages when really it would take much longer than that. But, I mean, the more you can take off the consumer for, like, the complication of, like, restructuring their finances or for figuring out what value they're getting from your product or what value they're getting from your podcast, the easier it is to get people that are interested, because nobody wants to put in the work to like figure out why they should give you their time or their money. But if you can show them exactly why it's beneficial, like how you can help them or add value to their life, really is what it is adding value. That's huge.
Absolutely. And I actually didn't think of it that way. When you are pointing out the steps ahead, that is actually removing friction. I didn't think about that. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good point. Now, as for yourself, you're a person who has you've done a lot of things already.
Dude, I love doing things, you know?
Yeah, a man of many hobbies, really. So you're a double black belt in Taekwondo. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, second dan. Yeah.
And then you've ran on the Great Wall of China, a marathon.
Yeah, ran a full marathon. Yep, on the Great Wall.
Yep.
That was pretty cool.
Acro yoga?
I dabble. I wouldn't say like I'm good enough to actually like speak at length about that.
Yeah.
I've gone to a few classes.
So that's awesome. Like everything. And speak Mandarin too. A little bit of Mandarin. I know you went to
little bit. I've been back in the States for a few years, so you kind of lose it if you're not practicing.
Absolutely.
Regularly.
It's like a muscle you have to work out, or else it's
for
just
sure.
going to kind of deteriorate over time.
You minored in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
How's your Spanish doing?
Oh, it's deteriorating.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. But so as for all these hobbies, how do you kind of decide which one to focus on, or is it like you have to dedicate your time to each of them, or is it kind of more like something that as time progresses you choose different priorities?
So that would be, it's a complicated question. I would say it's a little bit of everything you just said, depending on what my goals are and like what phase of life I'm in. Do you mind rephrasing it a little bit?
Like, yeah, actually, Do you set goals for yourself to achieve these things, or do you just kind of follow them, and then if it happens, it happens?
So I really believe in the power of goal setting, or just kind of like knowing what direction you want to go in at the very least. So I definitely have diverse interests. I love reading books. I love playing and writing music, and I love, working out, and I love martial arts, and acro yoga, swing dance, like all kinds of stuff, swing dancing. It's great, but there's not time necessarily for everything. So I think part of it is I did taekwondo and jiu-jitsu for just years, from when I was a kid up until I was like towards the end of my teenage years. And I didn't have as much time to do it when I switched to college because it wasn't nearby and as accessible. But since I'd spent so many years doing taekwondo, for example, so I spent so many years like working that muscle out, like I had everything like built in. Or yeah, so in that case, it was just the amount of time that I had spent doing it. Even if I was able to return to that a few years later, spend a few months like training, and then start prepping for my second degree black belt test, and then like go back, learn all the forms and everything, like all the knowledge for that, and then test for it. And like for the Great Wall of China, when I was training for the marathon for that, I was in China studying Mandarin at Shanghai University, and I remember when I was packing, I left my those long distance running shoes that I had bought from our half marathon in Loveland, or was it Old Milford?
It was Loveland.
Yeah, in Loveland. I was looking at those like, I don't need these because they're only good for running. I'm going to bring these Nike finger straps because they're good for like working out and then walking. And I packed those. And while I'm studying with my cohort, this guy Alex that I met, he was like, hey, there's a marathon happening in the Great Wall of China. You could sign up for a 5K or the half marathon or the full marathon, but it all costs the same. So I'm doing the full marathon, and it's a great way to see the Great Wall. And I was like, well, I'm not going halfway, so I'm gonna. I guess I brought the wrong shoes. But I remember like thinking, I put up my Nikes, kidding. And I was like, all right, these don't have the insoles. These are not going to be the best for running. For that, I trained like maybe 4 days a week, running 6 or 7 miles at a time, which 6 miles on like flat land versus, all right, have you like seen pictures of the Great Wall?
It's very starey.
It's like built on mountains. Like there were some points where we were like kind of like crawling up the stairs.
Oh wow.
I have to check the history on this, but my theory is like they built the wall kind of uneven. Then they had these guard towers with like these small, like only one person can get through the door at a time. So that way if like the Huns or an enemy attacks, they like can't navigate the wall very well, and if you have to defend, you and your buddies like back into the chamber. They can only come at you one at a time. I'd have to fact check that, but that's what I was thinking while I was on the wall, because that would make total tactical sense. That's great if you're fighting off your enemy. If you're running a marathon on it, though, like there were some points where crawling up, and like at the beginning, I had to like sprint around a bunch of runners because I was like, I'm not gonna get caught behind you guys when we get to the first tower. I'm not gonna wait behind 300 people before we.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because that would like kill your time. But in that case, I just had to really like focus and push. It's a little bit different than another goal, like maybe learning a language or like mastering a certain level of proficiency at a martial art.
It's almost like a short-term goal.
It's more of a short-term goal because I definitely
crazy.
I trained for it, but I was too busy like studying the language, going to class, navigating the culture. I wasn't going to go to China and like study the language, but then spend my whole time training for a marathon. So maybe I would have done. I still ran the whole thing in like a decent time. I would have done better if I had more time to train. But in that case, it was like, all right, here's my minimum viable effort. I'm just going to push myself like crazy, like on game day. But then, yeah.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, like halfway through, my legs filled up with lactic acid and were like killing me. But I put on some like, early 2000s, like punk rock.
Tunes.
And
Keep you going.
Like, just blazed through it as well as I could. But, and what even got me after that, just complete side note, but we had checked out of our hostel that morning because we weren't going to like stay another night. So we took the train back. And like, so I ended up like running a marathon, then like going to a train like overnight without taking a shower. It was so
Oh, no.
absolutely disgusting, but totally worth it for like the story of running a marathon in the Great Wall. It was crazy.
That's incredible.
But yeah, so like for Taekwondo, it depends on what you're talking about, like the life phase. For Taekwondo, I'm more than capable of like defending myself or even like instructing other people and like hopefully getting back into it when I have more time eventually because of the amount of time I invested in it before. Then for, you know, running a marathon in the Great Wall, it was a matter of like focusing on the short-term goal at hand, getting myself up to pace where I was like in good enough shape to run it and just pushing through it. I think for other things like trying to get better at chess so I can like beat you once in a while, or trying to like stay fit by like working out, or writing music, recording it, having it produced and releasing it. It's a matter of balancing out what's most important to me right now, which for me at the moment is music, but also I don't want to like neglect my body. I want to take care of myself. I want to eat right and stay in shape. I do want to challenge my mind once in a while by reading books and playing chess, you know, on a regular basis. So it's a matter of saying, all right, well, I need to take care of my primary goal first, but I don't want to be so obsessive about it that I neglect the other goals. Yeah.
So do you write down your goals at all?
I actually don't. Yeah.
Okay.
I probably should.
Interesting.
But I just feel like I have a vision in my head of where I want to go with something, and I talk to my close friends about my goals and kind of get some feedback there, where I'll spend time reflecting on it, but I'm more about having like the internal dialogue with myself. It's the weirdest thing. I feel like when I journal, I get really concise clarity on a subject, but then like my brain kind of shuts down the dialogue on it because I've gotten the outcome.
So what do you mean by that? Your brain shuts down the dialogue.
So if I discuss a goal with you, like, hey man, I've been writing this song and I want it to kind of like sound like this and feel like this, and I'm thinking about releasing it like this way. Like there's a whole bunch of ideas going on, and when I write it down, if I kind of like journal on it or reflect on it, I'll know exactly what I want to do, but then it's kind of like maybe I'll improve and iterate the idea a little bit from there, but there it is. Like there's no more,
Okay.
you know, like
Understood.
open feedback loop. And I think in some cases that's really good, and I think in some cases I like the added turning of the gears that comes with it. So it depends.
Gotcha.
But that might be unique to me.
Okay.
How do you set goals?
I write them down. I write them down for sure. But it's interesting because I don't have, like when I write them down, a lot of the times I don't hit them. So I only hit like 2 or 3 of like the 10 goals I have. But maybe it's more of like I need to narrow that focus down on those 2 or maybe even 5 goals and then focus on those. But I mean, at least I'm achieving those. I could consider that a success, even though I didn't achieve as much as I wanted to. But as for journaling, how do you journal exactly? Do you just go for 5 minutes? Do you just write your thoughts?
It depends. I tend to just kind of journal what I'm thinking. My journals, when I write, it's usually more focused on self-reflection. So I'll kind of write what my thoughts are in that moment. And like usually 2 to 5 topics. I don't think about it in terms of topics, but it probably comes down to like 2 to 5 topics that are really on my mind right now. And I write like what I'm thinking, what my questions are, kind of what I hope comes down, like whatever I'm thinking about it. And if I do that twice in the same week, I've usually come to the point where I was processing something, and then I kind of know where to go in that, you know?
Gotcha. Okay. Is there a time and day where you usually journal or
Before bed.
before bed? Okay.
Because it's the end of the day. I have my thoughts collected. I have heard though, so like Childish Gambino will like get up and the first thing he does in the morning is like he'll write music then, because like your brain, you haven't fully woken up with all your thoughts and worries of the day that kind of like crowd out like all the stuff that he says, as he puts it. Like, I feel like you're closest to your true self right when you wake up, because like all the other thoughts haven't like come back and kind of taken over. You're just kind of in that like post, that like serene.
That's a really interesting way to put for Childish Gambino. I've never even thought about that. You're kind of like your true self in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a kind of routine or tactics that you have personally in the morning?
I mean, yeah. So I read Tim Ferriss's like 5 rituals for the morning, and
Love Tim Ferriss.
yeah, I think that's pretty helpful. I feel like there's just never enough time in the morning. Like, I feel like I have more control over my evenings, so I tend to do stuff then. But if I can wake up, if I have time to, the first thing I do is just drink water, because when you're asleep for like hopefully 8 hours,
Become very dehydrated.
yeah, that's the only time that you go 8 hours without drinking water. So I'll do that, and then I'll ideally spend a little bit of time just doing some calisthenics to get some blood moving, shower, eat, read, meditate for a little bit, and then, if I have extra time, and even if I don't, sometimes I'll sub something out for that, but I'll fool around on my guitar just to like get a little bit of practice in that day, but maybe write something new. Although for me, I feel like I'm more creative musically in the evening at the end of the day.
Okay.
I don't know what it is.
And there's 2 things I want to kind of hit on. So the first is meditating. So how do you meditate?
Usually for 5 minutes at a time, where I just sort of like sit there and control my breathing.
Just like sitting Native American style, like crisscross?
Yeah, some people do like guided meditation where they like put some audio on or something. I just like sit there and like kind of like take control of my consciousness more or less.
Okay.
Just like relax.
Okay. Gotcha. And then the second part is for music. So you've been really stepping it up in the music game recently.
Been trying, yeah.
With the band Soft Stone Hearts. That's awesome,
Mhm.
man. So you said you're more creative in the afternoon?
Evening, I would say, more or less. I don't know if that's kind of a similar idea to where you wake up in the morning and the thoughts haven't come to you yet. For me, I think in the evening, I've like finished working. I've worked hard. I've grinded for the day, but like it's done and I can like leave it at work, and then I can focus on music. So I really have to think about the day ahead because it's behind me.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's my theory. I mean, there's probably like some neurochemistry that goes
Mental.
into it, where like part of your brain is most alert in the morning, and part of your brain's more alert in the evening or something. But
Yeah, that could make sense. So what have you been doing recently for your own personal branding?
so for me, I've been looking at what the specific like sound, direction, vision, like the packaging of my band Soft Stone Hearts, like what that is, saying, okay, well, we're going to be specifically a indie rock band that relies with an emphasis on cello and like strings to bring out something unique, and like catchy melodies, and then some like in some of our heavier songs that more like pounding rhythms, stuff that has making it recognizable. So when people hear our music, it sounds like unique enough that they can get into it. But then also looking at like, we want a logo, which our logo is basically our name, but with like a sans serif font. So it's a very like smooth and recognizable, and like translating that into our website with our colors of like black, red, and white. So everything goes together. So nobody has to worry about, like if you see it all makes sense together. There was one band that I played a show with like 2 weeks ago, St. Mary, St. Michael. Great local band in Cincinnati. Their music is like, they play folk and it's incredible, but it's so hard to tag them on social media because their Instagram is like STMARY-STMIKE, St. Mary, St. Mike. Then on Facebook, it's spelled out St. Mary, St. Michael versus like St. Mary, St. Mike. So it's really hard to tag them. So that's a lot of friction for like a potential fan
Gotcha. Okay.
trying to like look them up. Because if somebody tries to punch in your band name and they can't find you immediately while they're at your gig, they're probably not going to
Start losing views.
Yeah. It's like, well, if I can't find this guy immediately, I'm not going to follow him on Instagram. Then they don't hear when you release a new song or hear about your next gig, and maybe they'll find you again eventually. But making everything as easy as possible. So if they look us up on Facebook, we're there. Excuse me. If they type in softstonehearts.com, we're there. If you look us up on Instagram, we're there. Making it really easy, so if somebody wants to discover our music or follow us to see what we're about, like there's no friction. We're easy to find. We're on all the platforms. Everything's cohesive.
Wow, Wow, that's great. Removing all friction, and that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting for like the
Consistency too.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for the brand.
And making yourself readily available to just reduce that friction completely. It's kind of interesting to compare the business aspect of like Amazon reducing clicks, and then the business aspect of getting views for a band.
Well, at the end of the day, we're all trying to add value to each other in some way, whether that's Amazon trying to like, get your money by being the most convenient and adding the value of convenience to your shopping experience, or me trying to get somebody's attention by creating like unique and enjoyable music. Like, it's different, but we're trying to add value to other people's lives. And if you can think about the best way to do that, just kind of keep your eyes on like, all right, like what do people need? What is the best way I can provide that value? Yeah, that's the game. And a huge way to do that, one of the crux of it, is removing friction, making it easy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that could be an absolutely perfect stopping point here for us. So, Chase, I seriously appreciate you coming on, man. I really thought this was
Absolutely.
great.
You made it a frictionless experience. Appreciate it.
Well, just continually trying to do that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, Chase Jeffries. You should check out his band, Soft Stones Hearts. You can find it easily on
Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. We're on it. Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you consume music or follow bands.
All right. Think you could play us a little tunes on the guitar?
Absolutely.
All right. Perfect.
Then you cue over to my music.
Dude. No,
Not
that's
me
good.